Comic like a clown, no noses, all pages. Bagging, boarding Batman in the gutter like amazing storytellers. We some fellas, we some felons in the mazes. Acapella varicella, cause the shit is so contagious. Mouse on the summaries, compiling guide the show. While the cycle spitting knowledge on the Yeti like a pro. Beat the babble, we the rabble, don't step to the squad. We get active, and haters like a cephalopod. You don't like fish talk? Do you hate a tomato? We the cuttlefish killers, tentacles on the table. Rate us 5 stars if you cherish your life. Bucky Barnes hit squad spraying lead in your pipe.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Is This Just Bad? Is This Just Bad? The best podcast you never heard of. I'm your host, Professor Mouse, joined as always by the CB Cosmologist himself, Jawbone McSkee.
We're back, baby. We missed you, dear listener.
We're back, baby.
There it is. I was like, are you going to say something else?
You didn't have the requisite pause. Mm-hmm. The pause is something that I didn't even realize we did until my younger brother, who I spent the last week with, reminded me of.
That's funny.
He was like, Why do you pause in that phrase? And I said, I don't know.
I think I got it from Kofi Kingston.
Is it? Does Kofi Kingston say that?
Yeah, so it's part of like the New Day and their whole thing.
Oh, we just stole it. Of course we did.
Because of course we did, right? Yeah. Nothing we've done is ever original. Come on. We're the great synthesizers. We aggregate and distill.
There's probably everything on this show, catchphrases, things of that nature, that we just blatantly stole from more talented folks.
I think the most original and truest thing is the is it or is it not detective?
Right. Which I said in a delirious episode of an older version of this show that doesn't exist anymore. And
pre-crisis.
is very stupid. But you can't convince me, you know? You can't trick me into thinking things are detective when they're not detective.
That's true. Yeah, and you're very good at detecting that which is detective.
Yeah, I'm the worst kind of armchair quarterback, like the guy that after they throw it instead of run it. What was that Super Bowl? That fucked Super Bowl?
Oh, with the Seahawks. Yeah.
With the Seahawks, yeah, where I'm like, you gotta run it afterwards. I'm that guy.
You got that perfect hindsight. Yeah. It makes it for a good podcast host and an analyst for sure.
Tell me about these jawbones.
Yeah, okay. So for I was gonna say for context, but when has anyone ever had context for anything we're saying on the show? So you're on some new fancy headphones, and you mentioned to me that they're for running, and there are some bizarre headphones that have come out recently that they don't go in your ears. Because the idea is you want to keep your head open so you can hear stuff and don't get run over by traffic or whatever. And so instead of conducting sound directly into your eardrums, they use your jawbone as a conductor. And so they just sit outside of your ear and vibrate the sound waves through your jaw and into your ears from there, which is spooky and makes me uncomfortable.
Is that good? Like, is it supposed to be...
So it's good insofar as apparently the sound quality is fine because it's just sound waves and your whole skull is acoustic, I suppose. But it's so that you aren't distracted by oncoming traffic. So it's good if you don't want to get run over.
Gotcha.
It's very bad if you're trying to. It's like the opposite of a noise canceling headphone. It doesn't cancel any noise.
Right. Got it. Yeah. That actually is a great thing. Because, sometimes when you're out and about, at least for me, I never don't have headphones in, oftentimes even in my house, but like for sure when I'm outside of the house. And, sometimes I do wonder if things are happening that I need to be aware of.
It's a good thing you don't have a pet underfoot.
Oh, fuck that. Yeah, no way. Never. Every time that we consider getting a pet, when it's in the just looking at photos and videos section of that process, it's great. And then if it ever gets to this point, which has rarely happened, where you start investigating how to, where you would even get a dog, like how could you get a hypoallergenic dog that's also a rescue type of thing? We just tap out, because at that point it becomes too real, and you realize, you're gonna have to take it out 3 or 4 times a day. It's gonna wake you up at 6 a.m. You're gonna have to, in addition to buying food for yourself, buy food for this thing. It's not a kid. It's not gonna grow up. It's gonna live 15 years. It's gonna die. It's just that whole thing runs through your head, and you're like, "Fuck, this is not worth it."
Absolutely. Yeah, weren't you thinking about like a hedgehog briefly?
I mean, every pet is too much. I know you have a snake, and even that's too much. I mean, just the idea of having to shop for anything that's not yourself.
I will say,
too much.
So in fact, we're starting to slowly look at potential new places to live. Local, same basic corner of the multiverse, but just a slightly more space. And as we're doing that, it occurred to me yesterday, we should maybe think about getting a bigger tank for the snake also, if we're getting a bigger tank for ourselves, because she's getting big.
It's good.
And and even trying to do that, and like thinking through the logistics of these giant glass terrariums. And the thing with snake tanks is that the one we've got is the biggest you can have would still have hinged doors instead of sliding doors. I really like the hinged doors because snakes are notoriously exploratory, and stick their heads where they ought not to. And a sliding door, I can just imagine this snake getting her head stuck trying to escape and doing something stupid. So, and then the whole rigmarole of this thing. So, and of course these things are giant, and like I'd like to see it in person before I decide whether the sliding door is safe for this snake. And I don't know where I'm going to do that. So now that it's safe, we might go to a couple of reptile shows, just because those can be fun. See the turtles and the lizards and whatnot.
Yeah, it's weird to be now in a in a world in which it is like relatively safe to just move about, and even to be indoors in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's strange. I've gone out to eat a couple of times because it's been Mother's Day and birthdays. My mother's birthday is very close to Mother's Day, and my father's birthday is very close to Father's Day, and so it's this like month-long period with 4 of those in a row, and it's a real hassle. It's a lot all at once.
It's great.
It's great.
It's all love.
But it's wonderful. But and I'm glad I get a chance to, the excuse to see him a couple of times. But it's just a lot to think about. Like, we got to find something different to do. But it's been strange going out to eat. And like the first time we went, it was an outdoor place. It was by the water. It was very open. We ate outside. And then 3 weeks later, I just today went to, and I was just inside and just had a burger inside. And the servers have masks, and like I'm fully vaccinated and I'm fine. I'm still wearing a mask going in and out of places just as like a public service announcement of like, I still think this is important. But it definitely, I don't know, it like exacerbates the classism that is that service industry to begin with, of like these people masked up and you're not, and it made me feel weird, dude.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Yeah, and that kind of animated my entire couple of weeks with COVID and shit like that. So we were off last week because my aunt, my sister's mom, passed away unexpectedly. She passed away last Tuesday. I don't understand time right now. She passed away actually last Wednesday. And this was 2 days before my birthday and her birthday. We shared a birthday.
Oh.
Yeah. She was my mom's older sister. She was a year or 2 years older than my mom. They grew up together in Puerto Rico. They came to the U.S. around the same time in the 80s. And they both passed away unexpectedly. In their houses. Like my mom had a heart attack, and she was alive long enough to get to the hospital, but once she got there, they were like, this is not looking good. And she passed away, an hour into being there or something like that, and she was 44. And so my Titi Toñi, her sister, passed away at home. and I don't want to get too much of the details, right, because of the family and stuff.
Sure.
But that was, it was shocking. You just get this text out of nowhere in the middle of the day. You're sitting there. I'm sitting there grading up to my ears in grading and shit like that, and having, by the way, the fucking most annoying registrar emails coming every single day reminding you have not submitted your grades when they're not due. They're not due for a week and a half. I swear to God. I mean, I think they're automated, so if I reply and be like, hey, stop fucking sending me these, it would just bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
But it was like, it was shocking. Because we get this thing, we get a message. It's very similar to how my mom, her sister, passed away unexpectedly. Right, people had just talked to her the day before.
Yeah.
She was all in good spirits and shit like that. Same shit happened with my mom. I had just talked to her a couple days before she passed, and so then it happened, and we got the news, and it was terrible. And so, we just all went to a city close to the city I live in. You'll never figure it out, and. We jumped in an Airbnb. We stayed at the Airbnb. It was a wild week. I'll say that much, because we were staying with family. This was like a moment in the semester where it was like very pivotal that I start like getting final grades in, and I realized like the relative what's the word? The relative importance of everything. It just gets put into perspective, and I'm like, I don't really give a shit about these final grades. I ended up failing students too, because there is this. It was a double-edged sword, right? Because most of the time, towards the end of the semester, you have students who have fallen off, and you're on top of them. You're constantly like sending emails and being like, this is what we can do, this is what we can do, this is what we can do. And then no response, usually what happens. And you'll, most of the time, 95% of the time, you get a frantic email in the middle of the night, right before grades are due. Hey, how can we fix this? And you're like, Jesus Christ.
Could have fixed this 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah. This time I was like, man, I can't really deal.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this. I can't do the whatever, professorial thing. I feel bad about it, but I ended up failing a couple students because it's like, I can't be out here hurting these students who have fallen off when I can't even like think, and I can't,
you can't even
be in front of a computer. I can't function.
You're trying to take care of yourself. And yeah, like it's that same kind of, that coddling becomes expected that professors will do that, but it's also not required. And it's something like you want to do, like as a good teacher and as a good mentor and as a professional. Like we do it gladly when we have the bandwidth, but sometimes you just don't. And yeah, it absolutely puts this stuff in perspective. It happened when my dad had his stroke. I was in the middle of doing work stuff, and it all fell off, and it was all like super stressful at work, and then it just didn't matter for as long as it needed to not matter. And just like, yeah, it's a totally different set of priorities, and it's weird trying to come back afterwards, where you're like, okay, I know eventually I'll settle back into this is going to stress me out again, or these are going to feel like they matter and the priorities are going to reset, but right now it feels very small and very insignificant next to your family and their health and dealing with grief. And yeah, I just had a grandmother die 2-3 weeks ago now, but she was ancient.
Wow.
And it was not a surprise. Like, it's still sad, and it's still tough, and the priorities still change. But when it's a total surprise, like with the stroke, like with your aunt, you can't prepare, and that's the difference. Is like we're still now figuring out the end game with my grandmother's house, and I'm gonna have to go down to another state at some point, and we're trying to figure out, I'll figure out the PTO for it, and if it doesn't matter, because everything doesn't feel like it matters as much as the family stuff. but I've got lead time, and it's always harder when you have to just drop everything and you're not prepared to. So
Yeah. It's pretty. Yeah, because everybody was still, at work, doing work and stuff like that. I mean, totally fucked up when it came to that. My younger brother, because we were supposed to celebrate my birthday that weekend, we canceled that. My younger brother comes over and we're trying to figure it out. We're like, all right, so we got to go up to the city that has a certain level of love that is brotherly.
convenient that your brother was with you for it.
Yeah, and we that served us some pretty good cheesesteaks of a Philly variety.
Was it sunny there? I hear it's always sunny there.
It was. Oh my God! It was too sunny there this particular weekend, and the air conditioner broke in our Airbnb.
Oh no!
It was a whole fiasco. But we go up there immediately and we forget everything, right? Because you're not even thinking in that moment. You just pack a bag or whatever. I was wearing the same clothes all weekend, but we actually had to come back.
You drove
and
back?
then go. Yeah, we had to come back and go back up because we didn't know anything, right? And when it happens, I called my dad. Because you have to do the phone tag thing, right? And you have to let everybody know. So my sister called me. I called my brother. Then I called my dad, and my dad was like. He's giving me advice because this has happened to him a few times. My grandfather also passed during quarantine. He passed of COVID.
Was he
and
in
it was
Puerto
one
Rico?
of. No, he's in Boston.
Okay.
And it was this happened in March, and so it was like a back.
Wow.
It was a back to back, it was like a 1-2 punch, and it was a grandfather who was close. I went to see him every summer for like 8 to 9 to 10 years maybe when he was living in Puerto Rico. And my dad was like ruined by this but this was March. And if you remember March, things were like dicey.
March
still.
of this year or March of 2020?
March of this year.
Okay.
So a couple months
Okay.
ago. But like a couple of months ago,
Things were dicey for sure.
Yeah, it was. That was a time in which it was like. I remember I got my vaccine in March, but it was like hard fought because you got your vaccine recently, right? You got your vaccine like April-ish,
Yeah.
late April.
Yeah.
And I got my vaccine. It was still based on like group number or whatever, right? So the only reason I got my vaccine was because I was an educator, and that I qualified for one of the early groups, and so I got my vaccine relatively early. But there were still like 150,000 cases a day being reported and shit like that, and they. The hospital that he passed away in was like very specific about no one can come here. He has to be cremated. We cannot move the body. All of this shit. And so they ended up doing like a virtual service for it. And my dad was pretty distraught about it. But he's dealt with this on a number of occasions. So I just asked his advice, and he said, "Hey, listen, don't ask anybody anything right now, because they're not going to know the answer to that, and the last thing they want to do is like deal with your accommodations. Like they don't get. No one gives a shit about you, so that's what you have to. That's how you have to operate right now. No one cares about you, but you do have to be up there, right? So
yeah, they need you there, but they also can't deal with you.
Right? Yeah, and it is annoying to. Because I remember when my mom passed away, people were calling us and being like, "Where should I stay?" and all this shit. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck.
Right.
I don't care where you stay. Like, I'm not making hotel accommodations for you. You know where we live. You've been here before. Figure it out. And that was also one of the things with my cousin and I, and she and I are pretty close. She and my sister are very close. They're like sisters, but she and I are very close. This is the daughter of the aunt who passed. When we were about to leave, we had like a moment where she was like, you all are the only people who really understand this, this specific thing, because it crazily happened exactly the same way to you guys. and they were sisters. They were full sisters, same mom, same dad. The only one of that brew, and there's a ton of kids from that mom, but the only ones that shared the same father were those two. So we just did it. We just, we got the Airbnb. We went up. We stayed in there. Immediately after that, we went over to her house. People who I hadn't seen in many years were there. We're looking through photo books, doing all this shit. Nobody, and the crazy thing about it is nobody has changed at all, at all. Nobody has changed. It's like, there's my cousin over there talking bullshit, saying things that aren't true, does not stop talking and just lies all the time. And we love him. He's like the greatest guy. He just does not know how to tell the truth in any way. My wife hadn't met. She'd met some folks. Some folks came to the wedding. Others didn't. So I introduced her to a lot of folks. My little cousin, who's 9, has like a YouTube channel and a TikTok, and she's doing this new thing, or she's playing with these new toys that kids have, which I don't know if you know anything about this. They're called fidget toys.
Fidget spinners?
And
yeah.
No. They're not fidget spinners. I was schooled on this.
Oh, okay.
They're like old school. You remember stress balls?
Uh-huh.
They're that. They, for whatever reason, and I think it is because the children of this generation are going to experience an amount of stress that has hitherto been experienced by any other generation.
Unprecedented. Yeah, they're the last generation, or they're going to grow up in whatever post-civilized.
They're going to grow up in
hellscape.
hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The kids born now, like that 9-year-old is going to live through Mad Max.
Yeah, for real. She's gonna live through like energy crises, never-ending wars, financial system broken, fall of the American empire, like real shit they're gonna experience. And so this is like a massive thing where now kids, 9-year-old kids, are playing with stress balls, and so they are marketing these like stress toys that you squeeze to relieve tension. They have these things called like infinity boards or something like that, where they're like, essentially that's just bubble wrap, where you remember bubble wrap where you like pierced the things or whatever. They're set up like that, but so that you can do it forever, so that when you push it in, it pops up on the other side, and they're like boards full of these things. And so
I've seen the little
she's
cubes that have like dots on one, like switches on one side, and it's almost like a very tiny Bop It, but they've got like lots of different fidgety things you can do to them.
Yes, she had some of those, and she was just and you can like look monstrosities of them, take various fidgets and stick them together and then pull them apart, and the whole thing is like tactile stress relief.
This is so fascinating because this is also the generation that is so much more than we were, so immersed from the jump in screens. And so like a lot of their entertainment and a lot of their media is not tactile.
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting that they've got all of this stuff that's digital, and then while they're watching or gaming or doing whatever, they also have a tactile component that's separate.
Yeah. And she would have these things, and it's not really like playing with them. It's just kind of like
fucking around with them. Yeah.
Fucking around with them, yeah. And so then we saw my 12-year-old cousin.
Wait, before you move on, did you mess with any of them, and did they relieve stress?
Yeah, I had, when I was there, I had just one in my hand, and I was like squeezing it through the entire day. They are fun to play with, and
satisfying.
Especially we were in a high stress situation as well. So, everybody was at one point had a fidget toy in their hand at one point.
That's
yeah,
cathartic for sure.
Yeah, and she's great, and she's gonna be some type of pop star when she grows up. And then we saw my 12-year-old cousin who, last time we saw him he was like 5'1", and now he's like 6'2" or some shit, and it's only been like 2 years or something like that. It just has ballooned in size and has become like a young man. And, saw my aunts and uncles for the first time in a long time, and they haven't changed at all, and they're force feeding you and, shaming you for not eating, shaming you for not visiting enough, all that shit. And yeah, so we did that the first night. The second night we went to one of my cousin's houses. She had bought a house. We sat in the back. We shared stories, all this shit. One story that I had with this aunt was actually the first time that I sort of like drank as an adult. Because I don't know if this happened to you when you were a kid, but this was like the culture of growing up in my household, is that what would happen is that everybody kind of had like latchkey kids. Mm-hmm. We were all just sort of like doing whatever the fuck we wanted. Our parents barely ever knew what we were up to. And whenever they would come and sort of like get together, they would always just be like trying to chill out, drink, smoke, whatever, outdoors, and have the kids just inside doing whatever. And
sure, you bring all the kids, you shove them in a room so you can go out and chill, right?
Yeah, which I imagine is like very much like, the fight nights that we have. Like that's the experience that they want to have, and they want the kids to self-regulate.
Yep.
just do whatever. And so I'd never, participated in obviously in the adult side, but so when my mom passed away, now suddenly I'm with the adults. I'm 20 years old, which is drinking age for them. For them, it's like 16 or whatever. So I remember with this particular aunt, man, we were all sort of like at my mom's house, and we had like this fire pit going. We're just lighting shit on fire that shouldn't have been lit on fire. And, my other aunts were in the house pillaging through my mom's shit, which is like a weird thing that happens. I think it happens this time as well. If people want mementos and keepsakes and shit like that, but it gets a little like robbery at some point.
Yeah, it reminds me. It's funny. The very beginning. I don't know if you remember this. It's the very beginning of the first Lord of the Rings book, I think. Or maybe it's The Hobbit, where Bilbo is having his birthday and he's like trying to disappear because his cousins are coming to steal all his silverware.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that is the Hobbit. Yeah. Wasn't that in the Hobbit movie as well?
Maybe, because they're waiting. He's lived too long, and they're waiting for him to die so they can take his stuff.
Yeah. That's a great correlation, because that is kind of how it felt like. But and so this particular aunt was like, nah, whatever. And so I remember she and my cousin who tells tall tales, but is also a very interesting guy, brought like 9 cases of like Michelob Ultra.
Okay.
which is light beer is the kind of beer that all of my elders would drink. And that is not because they were watching their weight or anything, because it's the cheapest, right? So you can
of course,
buy 24 for $6. And so we're sitting there drinking, and I remember the pace being like unstoppable. And so we had drank or whatever in college and stuff. And I think we probably drank too much at some point.
Definitely true.
That's but I never at this pace. It was like crazy, because they brought like a ridiculous amount of cases, like truly like 9 cases of Michelob Ultra. Where I'm like, what the fuck are we gonna do with that? That's like 7 of those cases are gonna be here by the end of the night.
Yeah, like we would go through one of those in like a really heavy weekend in college, maybe. Over the course of a week, but like they just demolished all of them.
They just demolished all of them. Wow. Granted, there weren't that many people there either. I mean, there were like 6 people maybe. But so we were drinking, and I remember it being like, all right, so we'll just crack a few beers and just chill out here. And so my aunt and my cousin were like just passing me, like they would go and they would finish one and they would pass me another one, and I would have like 3/4 of the first one still there. And then they would pass me the next one open, so I'd have 2. And so I'm like, okay. And then I would chug the other one, and I get started on the other one. I get 3/4. I get a quarter done that one, and then I have my third in my hand already. And so I'm like, oh no, this is what this is. And just like fucking juggling like 5 Michelob Ultras, just trying to keep up with that and the conversations that are happening as people are just like talking shit. And that was like a really fond memory too. And I told that story. We're like all sharing stories. And it was, small shit like that where it was just those tiny moments of conviviality, of also like getting older and moving into a different and developing like a different relationship with that person.
Yeah.
Whereas it was like disciplinarian, and now you're suddenly like drinking together, and I was smoking cigarettes at the time, smoking together and all this shit, becoming an adult before their very eyes and stuff, and getting married. She was invited. The tragedy is she was invited to our wedding, but she couldn't come because her best friend died that weekend. Yeah, but I saw her at my little brother's graduation. She was like very proud. All this shit. And yeah, so the weekend was all that, and then the funeral happened on Tuesday, and it was like, oh man, it was awful, man. I mean, I think that she would have liked it the way that it was. It was short. It was like 2 hours long. I remember at my mom's funeral, I mean, we had no idea how to plan this shit, right?
No.
And you know, hope to God or whoever that no one ever has to do this. I mean, you're gonna have to eventually, but hope to God it's a very long way away for whoever. And so I remember the first time we did it, we didn't really know how or what to do. So we got like a big space. I mean, you were there, and it was long as shit. It was like a 4-hour funeral or whatever. I remember I delivered the eulogy. We were like not letting people speak that much, but like my aunts were besides themselves, and they were sitting there at the casket, and at one point they tried to crawl in the damn casket, and it was like a real traumatic sort of like mess. And so this time around, it was like the 30-year-old kids or whatever were telling the aunts like, hey, none of that. You can't do that. You're not allowed to.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. One, it's traumatizing.
Yeah.
2, she would fucking laugh in your face if you did that to her. So you're not allowed to do that. And so this service was 2 hours instead of 4. There were, speeches. They were relatively short. People got to say their piece. But for the most part, it was just there. There was a viewing, and it got real when they sort of closed the casket. That was like a very sort of like emotionally charged moment. I mean, it's the last time you see this person, at least corporeally. And then I don't think they could help themselves at that moment, and I don't begrudge them that, and they just sort of fell out. Just fell on the ground and were inconsolable. And so, that was a terrible Tuesday. We went home. We were going to, no, we didn't go home. We went to eat Peruvian food after that. Talked, said our goodbyes, went home to go take a nap before we went to see my cousin for the last time, before we went back to the city that we're in. And we get home, and we've been having this. In addition to all this traumatic shit that was happening, we had been dealing with the worst Airbnb of all time.
Oh, you said the air conditioner broke.
Well, it's a number of things happened. So it was at this property that had absolutely no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. Like the parking garage was dangerous. There was like mold and shit in the hallways. The hallways were all fucked up. The rooms were great though, and because you'd see the pictures of the Airbnb itself, but we didn't realize that the property being that shitty would affect the experience. There were people on staff, and obviously this was not their fault, but there were people on staff and they didn't know anything about anything. And so I remember we asked like, hey, because there was like a rooftop where you could go and work. It was open air and safe and shit like that. We're like, hey, where's the rooftop deck? And then the person's like, I don't know. And you're like, oh, okay. I guess we'll go find it. Every time we called down to the desk, they would do the I just got here thing. And so we would be like, when the AC thing started working, we'd be like, the AC's not working. And then the guy would be like, well, I just got here. I don't know. Try turning it off and on. And we're like, okay, so this is not going to help. So then we contact the person who is the Airbnb person. And this is like a different level of landlordism. This is a person who has multiple units in the same apartment building. And not just in this apartment building, but in adjacent apartment buildings as well. So these are people who have bought apartments or rent apartments, or I don't know how the profit share works, but they like own apartments in various different buildings in this downtown area. And they are like in touch with the management and stuff like that. So they contact the management, and the management says, yeah, the whole floor of the AC is busted. And so like, okay. And then she says that they're getting a maintenance crew out there to work on it. The entire day, we're trying to get some work done in the apartment. It is hot as shit. It's like 90 degrees in the apartment. And it's undoable. So we just leave. We go, we sit outside. The thing is that the rooms were so insulated. Outside it was like 65 degrees. It was actually kind of breezy. So it doesn't make any sense that the fucking apartment is that hot. And so, we're trying to do whatever. And then the maintenance crew or whatever fixes it. And so that night we get to sleep with AC. The previous night we slept with the AC off. So, and it was undoable. Like we were all like breathing heavy, snoring, sweating through the damn sheets and shit like that. And then that morning we woke up. That was the 90-degree morning where we couldn't get any work done. They fixed it that night. And so we were like, cool. We thought that the whole thing was done. It was 2 days of like fuckery or whatever. So then we go to the funeral and we're gone all day. We come back and the whole AC unit is out of the wall. They remove the grate out of the wall. They remove the filter. They remove a bunch of like inner parts. They remove the part that has the buttons that tells you how hot it is and how cold it is, where you can adjust it. And it's on my little brother's side. That's where he's sleeping. And they just throw the shit on all of his clothes, and all of his shit is just all fucked up.
Wow.
And it looks initially like somebody broke in.
Right. Just ripped it out of the wall.
Yeah, but it wouldn't make any sense. Why would they break in and rip the AC out of the wall? That doesn't make any sense. All of our shit. I mean, there's my computer sitting right there. My wife's iPad. All of my brother's stuff is just sitting there untouched. So this is a robber who came in just to fuck with us. So we call down to the desk. The guy goes, I just got here. So
cool. Thanks, buddy.
So, like, cool. All right. So then we contact the person and they go, because it was so weird because the AC was working when we left.
Yeah. Why did you rip it out again? It was fine.
So then we contact the person and they go, they don't give us an explanation. They refuse to give us an explanation. And my wife said like it's kind of like messed up that we come back and this stuff is ripped up. We didn't get any prior notice.
Yeah.
And it's all, there's like dust and all of this like oily shit on my on my brother-in-law's shit. Like this is not okay. Also the AC was working. So like what's going on? Just ignored that part and was like, we need to get you in another unit.
Yes, but that's you should have done that anyway.
Yeah, and we're supposed to be taking naps because it's been a long day. Just had a meal or whatever, and we're supposed to meet up at 7 p.m. to see my cousins for the last time. And so they're saying, no, you have to pack all your shit and move to another unit. And that's the point where it's like, well, we need a refund. So we ask for a refund. They say 10%. And you're like,
No.
how? This is 3 days out of 6. So this is half of the amount of days are all fucked because of this. And they're like, oh, we negotiate filing for two nights, essentially. For the night where we had to, or 2 days, that is. So the day that we couldn't fucking do any work, and then that day where we would have to move all of our shit.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, fine, whatever. Don't really feel like arguing about this shit.
Yeah.
So then we move apartments, and the fucked up thing is that the apartment we go to is like totally great. It's way better than the one we were in, and it's just been sitting idle in the fucking building the entire time.
Right.
Just so fucking pissed at everything that's happening. And at that point, we were like, man, this has been maybe the worst trip we've ever taken together. Truly.
Yeah.
Like the worst trip we've ever taken together, given all of the circumstances, all of the fucked up shit that happened.
You're already starting pretty low when you're traveling for a funeral, and it just gets worse from there.
Yeah, it was awful. It was really, really awful. But yeah, we did a bunch of firsts as well. We went to the first outdoor dining experience that we had. Actually had some pretty good food. Don't remember what the place was called. We did our first sort of like indoor hang with vaccinated people.
That's cool.
Which was, it was cool. And then the first trip away from home with, somebody else, because we brought my brother.
Yeah, that's a lot to do all at once, and like you're forced to, and I'm so thankful and you're very lucky. And if you have to be doing this under these terrible circumstances, it's really good that you all got vaccinated and you're able to do it as safely as possible. And like that's great, because then you can really see people and spend time with them, and you're not, I hope, consumed with that same kind of anxiety.
Yeah, that was the only sort of like saving grace of it all, because I do remember like when my grandfather passed, it was just impossible.
Yeah.
There was no way that we could go up there. My dad hadn't maybe my dad had gotten both shots, but he wasn't immunized yet. And certainly my stepmom hadn't, or my stepsister, or my stepbrother who lives with him. So that was tough. I hadn't. Maybe I had gotten my second shot, but I wasn't immunized. I'm not sure. But it was just impossible at that point. Mm-hmm. No, you know what it was? I had gotten my first shot. I remember, because I'd gotten my first shot, and I did what my dad told me, which was this terrifying story. He said when he was in the Navy, when you're in the Navy, you have to go everywhere, which means that you have to get every shot for every place. Mm-hmm. So you have to get pneumonia, typhoid, like all that shit. And the way that they do it in the Navy, which is like the sick military shit, is you do it all at once. Ugh. And so they go in assembly line style, and they're just shooting you full of fucking vaccine juice, and you're just like baned out. and they're just shooting you with venom, like 1 billion milligrams of shit is just running through your body. People are passing out and shit. People are throwing up. It's fucking gross.
That's nuts.
But so it gets worse. So the thing that they tell you to do, then they put you through like a fucking obstacle course. And so they're like, you got to run a mile, you got to do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, all this shit. And so my dad was like convinced that that's the way that you get over vaccines. And he's been doing it ever since, right? And so even, and my dad is disabled. It takes him a while to get up and off the ground, but he's like, no, I got to do my push-ups. And so he did, after he got his COVID shots, he did push-ups and shit like that. And so he told me, and I was like, all right, whatever, I'll do it. And so I did do it. And I don't know if it helped or not, but I did.
There's no way that helped, dude. It probably didn't hurt that much, but there's no way it helped. That's crazy.
I understand in this particular situation where it's like a tetanus shot, it's going to fuck your arm up, right? So get some exercise for your arm so you get some mobility and stuff. And I think they even say that, right? On the package, or on the packet that they gave us, at least, it was like, do some light arm exercises, I think is how they put it. So that, you're stretching your arm out, and it's not like locking up or whatever. It's not tense, because then it'll be all fucked up. But it's like, that is not equivalent to the story you told me about you got like malaria shots and shit, and they made you run a mile.
No, that's just
that
hazing.
doesn't make sense.
That's just straight up hazing. Wow.
Yeah, but that was that, and I guess we're rescheduling birthday plans and shit.
I guess.
And
yeah, we'll figure that
we
out.
haven't gotten together, so that's gonna happen hopefully soon. Grades have been submitted. They were due last night at 11:30 p.m. I submitted them at 11:29 because I was waiting for students again. I was like, "Hey, unless you respond to this, I gotta give you an F," and didn't get any responses. So
Got the F. Yeah.
Yeah,
Got that
I was up.
documented. Good.
I was up late doing that shit, and this morning I woke up and I was just fucked. I have been just like absolutely off because I was like on a very strict diet, but then you go and you do this shit and it's like impossible to do that. So I've just been like totally off the diet, off the wagon, trying to get just back on it and achieve some level of normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
But every semester where I just have this like adrenaline dump and then I get sick for a week because my body has just been just using its immune system to ensure that I do not perish.
Mm-hmm.
This is another level. This is another level of exhaustion. I don't understand how I'm even doing this podcast, to be honest, because for transparency, I was supposed to do this yesterday. We were supposed to do this yesterday, right?
Yep.
I don't even think I could have done it.
No,
I
mean,
was
you
so
texted,
fucked.
You texted me about it. You didn't even text me back when I was like, "Yeah, we'll just do it tomorrow. It's fine." And then Priya texted me later, being like, "Hey, he's asleep. Are you supposed to be recording today?" I'm like, no, it's fine. We'll figure it out later.
Oh yeah, I fell asleep like, yeah. What I did yesterday was I was grading. I don't even know. I was grading or whatever, and then I sent a bunch of emails out to students where I'm like, kind of last call emails of like, you gotta respond to this or respond to this by 11:30, or I have to do what I have to do. And then I was like, okay, let me take a quick nap. And then I fucking fell asleep for like 3 hours. Just couldn't stay up. Yeah, and then I got up and then waited by my computer, kept refreshing the time, kept refreshing my email, dropped the grades,
Drop those F-bombs.
and dropped a couple F-bombs, dropped the grades, then passed out, and I woke up today at like 1 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I'm glad. It's good talking to you. But yeah, that's rough. So you've got this long weekend now, and then do you have time to just crash, or have you got stuff for school post semester that you have to do?
I have a little bit of time. I think certainly taking the rest of May off, which is not that much time
3
left.
days,
But yeah, but like 3 days of like hardcore nothing,
Yeah.
I think will engender some positive results.
For sure.
And then there's stuff that I want to do too. Like when shit like this happens, you're pretty much incommunicado. But then I came back and I was like, oh, Army of the Dead dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's stuff that happened, and actually we were gonna try to watch Army of the Dead at the Airbnb one night, and it's just like the runtime is
How long is it? As a Snyder
It's
movie.
2 hours. It's 2.5 hours
Oh
long.
my God, that's too many.
Yeah.
That's too many.
Yeah, it's oppressive. It's oppressive where we're like, this looks cool, I think.
This
but
looks like 90 minutes worth of cool.
But it is one of those things where if 2.5 hours, right? I can watch Heat. Like I can watch Pacino and De Niro go at it, and I haven't seen Heat. And I've been wanting to watch Heat for a really long time. I actually just purchased Heat. I've been purchasing movies now because they're so cheap. and I got spooked because of the Triller lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something good came of that. But I found Heat for like $5.99 with like an Apple credit, and I was like, I've never seen this. I want to see this. Pacino and De Niro doing scenes together.
That's cool.
In the 90s. I want to see that. And it's like 2.5 hours long. It's like, am I gonna watch Army of the Dead am I going to watch a Zack Snyder movie? Am I going to give this man so much more time in my life, or am I going to go watch the classics?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's speaking of putting things in perspective.
Right. Like, how many Kurosawa movies are 2.5 hours long that I have not seen because they're so long that I could watch instead of this fucking movie?
The answer is all of them. They're all super long, but they're all worth
Except
it.
like
They're great.
Rashomon is like 80 minutes long or some shit like that. There's like a couple of them that are weirdly short.
Yeah.
But like most of them, yeah, they're epic. They're like fucking Ran is like 3 hours long or some shit.
Yeah, Throne of Blood's long. Yeah, Jimbo's pretty long. They're all good though. That's
Yeah.
funny. Well, last thing we'll talk about then. Speaking of getting out and out into the world, so we were gonna get together because it so happened that I was coming up to your neck of the woods for a cosplay event, and so this is there's a local group of cosplayers and photographers who get together, and we haven't seen each other in a year and a half, and it's finally safe, and so we got our temperatures taken at the very beginning, and I was like, look, if you're totally vaccinated, you're good to go without masks, which is good because I got very close to screwing up all my makeup wearing a mask on the way up there. But it was in a graffitied up warehouse with like lots of cool designs, and it broke out some a John Constantine cosplay, and Maul did Zatanna, so those fit pretty well together and got a lot of cool shots. It was really good to see them. These people, they've become friends. You see them enough times over the course of a con. Obviously, a lot of them have shared interests, building costumes, photography, nerd shit. Good people. And it was weird getting back into it. And, it's funny talking to the photographers, like, they're trying to get back into it, and they haven't, problem solved with lighting and angles and shadows in a year, and the models and the cosplayers are all like, I don't remember how to pose anymore. I don't remember what's my face supposed to be doing now. So we're all just kind of learning, but yeah, it was really good. I'm starting to get shots back that'll go up on the old Instagram, and weirdly, so we got a shot in front of one of the walls, and somebody had graffitied "gay chaos" on the wall. I'm like, all right, I'm dressed as John Constantine. Both I and he are bisexual. This is a good one. And so the first couple of shots that I had, I took like a selfie as well. I posted on Instagram, and I tagged them. And it's Pride's coming up, so tagged them with like queer cosplayer, and I think that might have been the first time I had tagged stuff that way. I think that's the only difference of those tags, and my Instagram has exploded since then in the last week. It's really funny.
Wow.
Exploded for me, it's like 300 people or less, but I've crossed the threshold of I now have more people following me than I am following, which is, something. And and they're mostly a lot of Latino dudes, actually, just randomly looking at their handles. And I don't know, because I didn't post anything specific. I don't know if John Constantine has a fan base that I'm unaware of, or why specifically, like, that the tags wouldn't have targeted a specific demographic beyond, like, gay guys. It's fascinating. It's just, like, I don't understand how the algorithm works, obviously. I'm not good at this.
Is it like location based?
No, I don't think so. Like, I did tag it with a location of the area, but these people are all over the place, and a lot of them are like in Mexico or in Venezuela or like randomly. It's not U.S. based accounts that have found this.
That's interesting.
It's really strange. But very flattering. I did get one DM asking if I have an OnlyFans, so that I'm considering now. If there's actually a market there, we'll see.
There's a market. There's definitely a market for OnlyFans, like cosplay content, and I think that because OnlyFans did like a thing that was all over the news where they were trying to diversify, because what is the perception of OnlyFans is that it's like pornography, but then they started giving like deals to a bunch of different types of groups
Well, this
to
is
try
what's
to.
interesting about OnlyFans is that it didn't start out. It was supposed to theoretically be what it says. It's for fans of content creators, and that content didn't have to be porn.
Right.
By nature, it's just that like that is what sells. So it was so because it wasn't specifically a platform for sex workers, and it was kind of this like, hey, you'll pay the guitarist you really like or whatever. Even though that was probably mostly for plausible deniability, then it didn't have good, clear terms of use in place because it wasn't purpose-built for anything specific. And then it got primarily used for sex workers, and then the people who made OnlyFans got awkward about the fact that they were now a platform for sex workers, and then they tried to diversify again, but then somebody like Bella Thorne pulled some kind of scam.
Yeah, that was a big controversy.
Yeah, pulled some kind of scam on her users, which didn't hurt her at all, but hurt all of the actual, like, legitimate sex workers who are trying to make a living by ruining the sorts of prices they could charge for their work. And, yeah, I mean, OnlyFans as a... So when I say OnlyFans, I say OnlyFans the same way I'd say Uber. Like, I'm not actually talking about Uber, the service. I'm talking about like, Uber and Lyft and taxi services. OnlyFans, specifically...
They're different platforms.
Yeah, I would never, I think, actually use that specific platform because the people I know using it have a hell of a time with it, and it's very shady and not trustworthy, and there are plenty of better competitors. Anything from Patreon to Just for Fans. There are both better platforms that are specifically for sex work, and better platforms like Ko-Fi and Patreon for content creation of other kinds.
Patreon would be interesting, although it's bizarre. Patreon has become like, yeah. Well, so the thing with OnlyFans was they reached out to people like Tyga. They reached out to people like who offer their accounts for free, so that you could sign up to a bunch of different content creators' accounts for free, and then they would give you like in-app purchases, right? So Tiger would do like whatever music demonstrations or beats or freestyles or whatever the fuck, and then charge you to see that shit. And that is the stuff that's curated at the top instead of sex workers. So sex workers get this like shadow ban, despite the fact that they're the ones who are keeping that platform alive.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so fucked up. But Patreon is also weird because Patreon makes most of its money with like weird conservative podcasts.
Oh, really?
or like the top of the charts at Patreon, like Flagrant 2, which is the shitty podcast. Andrew Schultz and Akash Singh, these like New York-based comedians that went down to Miami because they didn't like the COVID protocols in New York, and they have like weird opinions about shit, that like conservative, but like mostly like toxically masculine shit. Right. There's a podcast called Come Town. That is one of the most popular podcasts on Patreon. And you can just sort of guess what they talk about. Chapo Trap House, which is like a dirtbag left podcast.
Yeah, what makes them dirtbag leftists?
They're like the kind of Bernie bro that they're the kind of Bernie bro that you might say doesn't exist.
I see. The toxic misogynist ones.
Yeah, they're like but they have a massive. I believe they're number one.
Yeah, I mean, I know the name. I've never listened to it, but like I know that name well enough just from being on the internet. Like they've made their way into mainstream consciousness. But yeah, if it's the kind of I'm gonna pretend to be leftist as a cover for the fact that I'm still actually a racist or a misogynist, is like not good enough.
I don't think that's what it is. I mean, they're definitely leftists for real. But yeah, they just have this kind of like way about it, a way about them that is, I think, discrediting a lot of the types of arguments that people of color make about inclusion and diversity and stuff like that. Yeah, so Chapo's up there, Come Town is up there, Flagrant 2 is up there, and it's weird because Patreon started banning creators who were doing like vaccine related stuff, where they were talking about like or casting aspersions on the vaccine, or they had something in their TOS which was altered, where it was like misinformation about public health information and shit like that.
Good.
Like where Joe Rogan probably would have been deplatformed on Patreon. Yeah, so it is weird. And there was something that happened where Rogan was talking about how straight white males won't be able to have a voice anymore on his Spotify shit. And that kind of went viral while I was gone. And it's emblematic of his descent into like straight up conservatism.
Yeah, that's the last straw. Like that, he's totally gone. Think about the scene from Terminator of where he calls the kid's parents, like, your parents are dead. Joe Rogan's dead.
Yeah. So I don't know, but Patreon might be a good platform for
we'll see.
Cosplay stuff.
Yeah,
So-
Mal's
so-
really leveling up her photography game, and so I most of my experience being a cosplayer is standing around and looking pretty while she makes stuff. So I can continue to do that.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. But no, very flattering, very cool. I don't know if any of my new followers on Instagram are listening. If you are, welcome. This is the side hustle of side hustles, none of which, I guess this one technically is monetized. A couple of bucks every year.
Yeah, like a couple of bucks every 2 years.
Yeah, right. But so we'll see if we can exceed that with whatever it is I decide to do, if I decide to do something on the Instagram. But in the meantime, it's just nice to. I mean, it's nice to share the art. It's nice to connect with the community of cosplayers and artists. I followed back the people who have followed me who are artists, and seeing some cool work I was not aware of, and it'll be nice to get back to cons. I mean, I think I'm probably still going to the next cons that are happening in August. We'll see in terms of what public health advisories look like between now and then, but I'm hoping I can get back out into the world.
Yeah. That's going to be really fun. I think that we need to have like a segment on this podcast because our friend Leland frequently messages us about stuff that we talk about on the show. I don't know if he does that to you, but he does that to me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's great because he'll message us, but he'll never message me with any context, and it takes him like 3 messages for me to understand. Oh, he's listening to last week's show. Got it. Now I understand what he's talking about because he's in dialogue with us, but with a conversation we had 5 days prior or 2 days prior.
Yeah, so I do want to shout something out so I talked about a movie called Demons, which I liked. That was the movie where they were in the movie theater.
Oh yes,
that one. And so he messaged that he used to watch, or that he does watch Shudder a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The service that I was talking about. And he gave me actually a recommendation that I did watch. So he recommended this movie called Ganja and Hess.
Oh yeah, we're talking about this. It's a vampire movie, right?
Yeah, it's like a weird vampire movie. It was done, I believe, in 1973. Let me make sure that this information is correct because
this is how you know what Mouse really cares about. Like the rest of this, we've just been freestyling, but this one he's gonna look up.
Yeah. It was a Bill Gunn joint, 1973 experimental horror film. Bill Gunn is in it. He directed it. It stars Dwayne Jones, and Dwayne Jones is a phenomenal actor who only appeared in like 7 or 8 films. But 2 of the films that he appeared in, his first 2 films, in fact, were Night of the Living Dead. He plays Ben, and this is like George Romero's like fucking classic zombie film, which is absolutely phenomenal, and he plays a lead role in it.
Yeah, the OG.
Yeah, and he was also 5 years later in a movie called Ganja and Hess.
I love
And so-
him in Night of the Living Dead. He's got this like well, he's just fantastic. He's got real leading man energy.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and talking about the performance too much will ruin the film, and the film definitely has a twist that is worth watching. But what I will say is that what he has to do in that movie in order to make the ending sort of work is really a delicate tightrope act, and he pulls it off perfectly, because it is like it is so affecting what happens at the end of this film. But so in Ganja and Hess, he plays a much different role. He plays this like vampire who's been alive for a really long time. And the story is that Bill Gunn was approached with an offer of $350,000 to make a vampire movie. And he's an artist. He wrote books. He was a really prolific playwright, and he had this way about him where he was like very much a postmodernist who was in conversation with the people who were like developing postmodern literature and film and experimental art in the United States. William Gaddis, who won the National Book Award twice, I think, who was a postmodern artist, is like in Ganja and Hess. And so he's approached with all of this money to make a vampire movie, and he's like, fuck that. I'm gonna take the money, but I'm not making no fucking vampire movie. And so what he ends up doing, and the reason it's like an experimental horror film, is that he uses this sort of vampirism to stand in for a lot of different things that allows him to talk about addiction, that allows him to talk about religion, that allows him to talk about relationships, that allows him to talk about power in this film. And the only times in which the sort of the vampire thing plays is obviously the blood drinking and stuff like that, and the relatively supernatural powers of the lead protagonist Hess, and it's a fantastic film. And so yeah, Leland, thanks for the reco.
That's dope.
We'll devote a little bit of time to talking about shit he texts.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm gonna check that one. And that's absolutely what, in the way that Night of the Living Dead is not really about zombies. A good vampire movie is not really about vampires. There are some movies that you think about, like Interview with a Vampire, which is very much concerned with kind of the aesthetics of vampirism. Like Lestat is very, it's cool looking, and we get to play with costumes, and that's great. And that is a version of making those movies. But the other thing about a movie like Interview with a Vampire is the vampirism, of course, is a stand-in for toxic, abusive, clingy relationships or addiction, and the things that you can do well when you're not just, dealing with, I just want to put vampires on screen. If you've got a reason for it, you want to put, addictive relationships on screen and then use vampirism as an allegory, I'm all for that. And I can stomach a lot more violence and horror when it's allegorical, as we talked about last week. So that's sweet. Oh, one more follow-up then from our last episode, because I've been watching Superman and Lois, which has come back after its hiatus. And they're doing some really interesting things. The antagonist is from a parallel Earth where Superman is evil, and we are seeing a lot more flashbacks to his world with evil Superman. And evil Superman is terrifying. And terrifying, like invincible terrifying. Like it's a network television show, so it's not violent to the same degree, or it's not explicitly violent. It is implied to be exactly as violent. And I think that works better. Like, I don't need to see somebody explicitly get their head exploded by heat vision, but that is exactly what happened, and they imply it, and they are clear that that is what evil Superman has done to people. So it's very effective, and it gives Tyler Hoechlin a lot of room to play. It's really interesting. What we don't like about Superman stories is when he's so boring, because he's just too good. And what's really interesting about this version of him is he's so aware of the delicate place that he has and the delicate trust that he's built with humanity, and he knows that that could be broken at any time. And he also has an underlying rage that, he would at some level like to break it, but chooses not to. And that's a much harder thing to do than to just be evil. So it's cool to see him playing this kind of restrained, good person who's struggling with anger, and then on the flip side, seeing his unleashed form. And there is a massive twist with the character that who appears to be an alternate version of Lex Luthor in, well, it would be this week if you're listening to this when this comes out. It would have been the episode that comes out this week. That is very effective. And I will not spoil it for you. We can talk about it later if you end up not watching it. But introduces other very cool characters that we haven't seen very much of on screen. And yeah, he's giving me everything I want out of a Superman show, which is a tall order since you need to give me a lot for it to not be boring as fuck. So
Yeah.
good on them.
That sounds great.
Yeah, they're doing a good job.
And I'll plug, just because this came to my mind. There was a film that we watched that I almost forgot about. My wife and I, we were on this service called Letterboxd, which allows you to like rate movies and stuff like that, which is great for us because we have every like streaming service. So we're like on HBO Max, we're on Shudder, we're on Netflix, whatever.
So we're trying to keep track of what you actually watched.
Exactly, yeah. And we rarely, I don't think that we've ever given a movie more, I don't think we've ever given a movie 5 stars, like the both of us. And that happened for the first time on May 17th. It was in the sort of vein of our current obsession with all these fucking Italian movies from the 70s. It was Dario Argento's Giallo. It's called Deep Red.
Okay.
This movie is fucking phenomenal. I mean, it is like if you want to really just watch one Giallo, that's like it. You if you want to be introduced to this medium, into this genre, into this sub genre of filmmaking, of like the Giallo from the 1970s, a murder mystery slasher Italian film, watch Deep Red. This was probably the best of these movies that we have seen, and ranks among one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life.
Wow.
I mean, it's incredible. And one of the things that is so incredible about it is the storytelling is great. The twist is great. It's scary. It's not terrifying. The visual sort of language. Dario Argento, I feel like, wanted to be trashy like his friends, but had so much more sort of like artistic vision. Because all of his... Can't help
himself but be artsier.
Yeah, all of his friends were making these movies with him, and you can see his contemporaries making these films. Like, you can watch Lucio Fulci, you could watch Mario Bava. Mario Bava was great, but he actually, before him, you can watch his son, Lamberto Bava. You can watch all of these guys, his contemporaries making these films, and they're good and they're fun, but they're just not. They're not at the level that he's producing at, which is like super high. And the visual style is amazing, and the music, the soundtrack, the score of this film is like very, very much predictive of like the Safdie brothers. Like they are using synths. It's like this weird progressive rock. It's like jazz fusion that's used throughout this film. That I believe was scored by a band called the Goblins.
Nice.
And it is just an amazing film through and through. And they have all the requisite shit that you need in one of these films. So you also get the pieces of the movie, which is like it's detective shit done so that's like always trying to misdirect you. We at one point, and this is something that we've begun doing whenever we watch these movies, is like about 30 minutes in, we write down our prediction of who it is.
Cool.
Who the killer is.
I like it.
And we did it. We wrote it down. We wrote down the same person. And then I can't say anymore. But it's great. You should watch it. It's great.
Sweet. Yeah, I just looked up screenshots, and like all of the posters are stupid as hell. Like it's like, you know, cringy B movie, and then the few images are beautifully composed. So this little blonde kid with a knife, and like, wow, that kid, like, that looks like a painting. It's just like really well shot. That in a way that I wouldn't expect given the trashy posters.
Oh yeah, they market it in a certain way. It's weird. Yeah, they market it the same way they market all of his like Friends movies, and there's just a marked and distinct quality that his films have that they just can't achieve. They just can't figure out that. I mean, nobody can, and that is why he was like this legendary Italian filmmaker, who evidently had like kind of that thing that Tarantino's always talking about, where a director does it too long, and so they start to parody themselves, and the movies just start to feel repetitive. And so he's still alive, but he's not really making movies anymore. His heyday has passed him over, but there is a period where, in the 70s up into the 80s, where he's just making hit after hit after hit after hit after hit.
It's so funny because you could absolutely see A24 producing one of his films. Like, I feel like that's what they're going for a lot of the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. They do. I mean, they do have people on their, like the Safdie brothers are a perfect example of the kind of like suspense-based filmmaking does really speak to, or does really echo this kind of like 70s Italian cinema schlock type of B movie, the sort of exploitation film. Yeah, I would love to know if they curated anything on the Criterion Channel so I can see what their actual fucking influences were, because their movies are like crazy good. They really are. If you haven't seen Good Time, the one with Robert Pattinson, you should watch that movie.
Yeah, no, I've not seen it yet. I need to do that. That one looks great.
Yeah. I mean, it for people who have anxiety, which you and I both have, it's kind of tough. It's tough because they trigger panic in you as you're watching these movies, and they're not horror films. They're like something totally different from that. I mean, I guess you could classify them as suspense movies. They're definitely not thrillers, but they have a kind of like anxiety-based filmmaking that is
they just wind
absolutely.
You up. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. The whole time you're on the edge of your seat, and it's like nothing is happening. They're like the car is broken down or something like that. Like that's it's like mundane shit that is stressing you the fuck out.
Cool.
Yeah, but we got a lot more to talk about, but we'll save it for next week. There's some mergers and acquisitions going down. There's a lot of stuff. I also want to talk about Dragon Ball Super, which I've been watching.
Oh, all right. Yeah, we'll talk about that next week. I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I have. It's not a hot take. The show is bad, but I want to explain in detail why it's bad.
Cool. Yeah, I watched a little bit of it when it started, and I watched a couple of the movies. So I know the basic like. I didn't get as far as like one of the evil Gokus or something, or the most recent tournament. But I'm up on it enough that we can have a conversation about that next week for sure.
Yeah. So that'll do it for this episode of Is This Just Bad? Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Is This Just Bad? Email us at isthisjustbad@gmail.com or just text us if you have our numbers. Follow the Cosmologist on Instagram at Sergeant Bucky Bear. That's SGT Bucky Bear. And follow Maul on Instagram at Mad Maul Cosplay. Photos coming soon. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.
Is this just bad? Bad?
Encyclo-pirates board your brain, robbing knowledge, no joking. Opening your mind with a crowbar till you're woken. Hitting Hydra, hailing hairs, have a time for hella reasons. We're more than winter soldiers with the men for all seasons. Listen closely while we share our expertise in cosplay comics culture. Dean is free tuition to the multiversity. Mouse is psycho teaching perfect balance when we snap infinite gems into your ears. Dust our shoulders when we speak. Purple man persuasive beat. We're Randy Savage Randalls with immortal technique. Ooh.